Hey guys, it's Graham. Do you want to know what's cracking? What's cracking is the hard fact that human resources as a trade exists to make people employable who would otherwise be completely useless to society. But I digress. Okay, so I did some reading today. I don't remember who recommended this. Somebody, it might have been somebody in the comments, was telling me about this book about John Wesley Hardin, or maybe I picked it up after reading a Mickey Punk book. I don't know. Somehow I heard about this autobiography about a Wild West gunslinger type guy and picked it up. It was a short read and it was really good. His voice was just really enjoyable. Like, it was really easy to sink into the setting, hearing this in his own words. There were times when I wondered if the story of this dude's life was a little bit embellished. He grew up in the South and was a wee lad when the War of the Northern Aggression broke out. And so, being a product of his environment, he grew up under the belief that Abraham Lincoln was an invading tyrant and so on and so forth. But he didn't really emphasize a whole lot of like Confederate sympathies or anything for the rest of his life. He kind of grew up in the wake of the war era and the Reconstruction and all of that, and he just was kind of constantly on the move doing hard jobs, cowboy stuff. He ended up getting into scrapes and scuffles. Ended up, killing a few people, and sometimes he was a gun for hire, or just like a wannabe lawman. He'd join up with mobs and posses and stuff. Like, it was just an account of a life of a man who sometimes did really good and great, commendable things, and other times did some very indefensible things. He was really kind of like a snapshot figure of his era. There was a time when he and a bunch of guys found out that this dude raped a woman, and so like they found out where he was and burned the house down that he was inside. And then like the coroner went on to declare that the rapist had burned the place down himself. And after that, like, Hardin also notes that, that coroner was there with us the night before when we found this guy and burned the place down. It's like, oh, woo damn. So it just shows you the mindset of that era, especially amongst the trade of kind of the wandering cowboy gunslinger type. The guy was married and had kids, and work took him away from his wife somewhat regularly. Just the fact that he was always out, trying some business venture or something or other. He was a good, like, talented gambler. He lost money sometimes, but he often won, and when he won big, that tend to piss people off. Sometimes people would try to set gambling traps for him. I don't know, like, overall it was a brief and enjoyable read that, again, just like gave me a glimpse into that time period and the mindset of people who lived in that place in that way. Content wise, he did live in the late 1800s, so he says the N dash dash 5 dashes word as a matter of course, just because it's like being a 90s kid and saying the F dash 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 word. Hey, it was normal then, and somebody decided later, like, no, you're the worst person in the world if you say this. Like, no, it was pretty common. Like, people just said it. It wasn't this massive cultural taboo. He talks about good ones that he knew and bad ones that he knew. It's just like the description of the book says. He was a man of his time. Sometimes he did really good things, and sometimes he did really bad things. Just learn about his life. So, really good book, really well put together, and I don't know the name of the narrator, but he did a good job. At the time of this recording, Audible has a sale going on. I think it'll be done by the end of this week, by the end of June 7th. But there are plenty of audiobooks that are like $2, $3, $4. I went through my wish list and I found pretty much the cheapest ones. This was one of them. It was like $2 something. So really good stuff there. The others that I did some reading today. So, gosh, on my Mayflower video, I must have mentioned that I was reading The Mayflower and Her Passengers by Caleb H. Johnson when I was at work in 2019. I was doing Pump Watch, where it's basically like you take these 12-hour shifts, and your job is to be there in case something goes wrong with the pumps. They're just going to be running constantly. You got to get out and walk the lines every 30 minutes, and then keep an ear out. And if they seize up or something, or if something pops and leaks, like you've got to kind of spring into action to button up the system, because there was a sewer bypass going on in a small town in Utah, and those pumps were basically operating the sewer system at night for the residents of that town. And so if the pumps failed, people's toilets would start backing up. So you're really only called into action if something goes wrong, but we'd put like 3 of our newest pumps on that system, and I would just go out every half an hour with a flashlight, walk the lines, and in 2 months of doing that job, I only had one incident where a coupler had come undone, and I had to kind of wrench it back together in the middle of the night, and that it wasn't that big of a deal. And the bosses even tell me, like, take something to pass the time. So I downloaded some shows onto my phone, I did some writing, and I did plenty of reading. But since the Mayflower video was about the Mayflower and not about that, there were a couple of people that would be like, "Oh, you were reading on the job, you were stealing from your employer." It's like, go to hell. Just go straight to hell. All right, do not pass go. But I got some time to read today. I always keep a paperback with me in case I end up on detention, which can happen if you work like I do and you get ahead of schedule. But you also have the compounding factor of you get to a stop and the customer is late. We just changed routes for the summer, and I've got a couple of stops now that are like this, where 2 weeks in a row now, this customer showed up an hour behind schedule. And you can do some other stuff to prepare for your next series of stops, but you can only do so much before you create more work for yourself. So you just go on detention and pass the time. So anyway, the book that I'm keeping on hand right now is The Super Generation. It's a Raconteur Press anthology. It's the one that I got accepted into last summer, and it's edited by Hinckley Correa. And this is one that I meant to make a bunch of content about, and I haven't yet. I just haven't had the time to do so much print reading. So there are 10 stories in this book. I have now read 4 of them, including the one that I wrote. This isn't going to be the dedicated Super Generation video. I'll do that later on. But obviously within anthologies, you write a story and then you think that your story is the best. I've read, like I said, 3 others. One of them was good, one of them was meh, and then one of them was great. And I just read the great one today. It's called The Other Place. It's the 4th story in the collection. The thing that I like about anthology pitches is that if the authors do the stories in a certain way, they can all exist in the same continuity. Sometimes the pitch is broad, like, we want to have a 1930s noir-style detective story, but everybody's a cat or something, like Moggy Noir. They've got pinup noir. They've got, all that kind of stuff. But this one was more specifically tied to a time and place. The idea being that in 1955 there was some kind of event that turned a whole bunch of people into superheroes, and the condition was not hereditary, so there would be a few generations of superheroes being a real thing, and then they'd die out. Knowing that, what's the kind of story that you would tell? My story is about a guy who he got blown up in Korea, and then the superpower thing happened. He got his powers, he recovered, and he became basically a superhero for the military and an icon against communism. But he was not one of those they're going to make comic books about me type superheroes. Like he was known within the DoD, but that was it. And the story is about questions of his legacy. Well, this story called The Other Place, and I'm blanking the author's name right now, the way that he wrote it, it feels like it could exist in the same way that mine did, but it examines a different side of the question. Superheroes that work with the government, but that are not trusted by the government. And the government tries to leash them, and if they're ever worried about these superheroes getting out of control, they'll kill them and kill their families. It's based on a much more cynical view of the government, which I think all of us are really on board with after the last several years. But man, it really spoke to me, and I was like, what if you had two superpowered individuals, and one of them was, really bought into the system, like the character in my story, and another one was kind of compelled to be in the system and didn't become cynical about it until later on in life, and had to try to find a way to escape it. The narrative mechanism for the story was really good too. There was, it was like alternating between two conversations. The main superhero guy was conversing with a reporter for an interview, and it was all smiles and bubbly and everything's great. And then also conversing with his handler at the CIA or whatever, and she was busting his balls and wanting to put a tracking device on him and all of that. So like it shows like this is what the public gets to see, but here's what's really going on as this guy is trying to plot an escape for himself and his family from government control. The other day I was watching Transformers 2007 with my kids, and I watched clips of the movies here and there, but this was one where we watched through to the end of it. And after the Decepticons are defeated, the military makes a big show about taking their bodies and dropping them deep into the ocean where they'll be crushed and entombed. And they even have like these kind of pressers about how, that way they can be destroyed and they'll never come back to harm Earth again. And I was like, maybe I would have bought that because I wouldn't have thought too much about it in 2007 when that movie came out. But now that I'm a 40-year-old cynical man, I was like, there's no way in heck that the government would actually do that. I mean, they would tell people that's what they did, but they would definitely not discard all of this advanced alien technology. Like, they would say, yeah, we dropped that stuff into the Laurentian abyss so nobody can mess with it. And then 10 years later, when we go to war with Iran, there would be an M1 Abrams tank that can drive right up to the border and then stand up and start punching the Iranians. We would do some stuff with those toys. We wouldn't just throw them away. And it's that same mentality that comes around in this story called The Other Place. So I like the idea that, like, out of the other three that I've read so far, that one feels like it's the most kindred to my story, to Last Flight of the Gargoyle. Anyway, I'll talk more about those when I've finished reading them all, and I'll do a nice detailed video out in the shop. I don't read a whole lot of anthologies. It's not something that I get into. If I can sell to an anthology, absolutely, heck yes. But this one, the concept has spoken to me more than any of the other pitches that Raconteur Press has done, because I thought it was cool to write about something that was so like finite and limited and definite, and know that everybody else is going to be working within the same parameters, because it had the most opportunity for a story that would have overlap with the other stories in the collection. And I'm a fan of that. So anyway, that's it for today. Y'all drive safe. See you out there.